Good morning and a very happy new year to all of you. I'm Savita Khosla, a practicing gynecologist in Bergen County, and I'm the host for this morning's seminar. Let us start the seminar by keeping in our thoughts and prayers those who lost their lives and millions who are suffering in many ways due to COVID. It has disrupted our lives socially, emotionally, physically, economically, and culturally. Every challenge has to be faced with courage. We'll come out stronger than before. We hope that with vaccine, we will turn a corner in 2021 and there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have assembled an amazing group of experts who will lead a conversation on various aspects of the disease. They will shed light on constantly evolving information and on strategies to cope with the devastating impact of the virus. We will start with Dr. Kapila discussing the symptoms and the disease, long term impact and management in adults. Then Dr. Suzanne Lee will be discussing how the disease is different in children and teens, followed by Dr. Bindu Balani, who will give us an overview of the COVID vaccine. Then Dr. Raghunath Mehta will talk on emotional and behavioral aspect of isolation in adults. In the end, Janet Hamill will guide us how to take care of our body, mind, and spirit during the difficult times. We will dedicate the last 20 minutes for questions and answers. Kindly submit your questions via Zoom on the chat function. We'll be muting everyone. We've been assured that none of our speakers have any conflict of interest in expressing their opinion. The first speaker, Dr. Rajinder Kapila, it's my honor to introduce him. He's a professor of medicine and infectious diseases in New Jersey Medical School, Rutgers University. He's a leading infectious disease specialist in the country and a highly published scholar who has been practicing for over 50 years. He'll be focusing on the disease COVID-19 in adults. To kick off our discussion, turning over to you, Dr. Kapila, it's all yours.
I want to thank, obviously, the Hindu Samaj that organized this very important function. And I presume you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Okay. And I want to thank, of course, Dr. Khosla and everybody who's involved in this. Happy New Year, and I hope 2021 is even happier. Obviously, we've gone through a very traumatic time during this past year or so, and one hopes that with all the new technology and the vaccines, which I think everybody recognizes will be the most important aspect of this pandemic, I hope the world becomes safer. Now, I have no conflict of interest as such, and I just thanks for that introduction. I've been teaching in the New Jersey Medical School for many years. Now, the coronaviruses are a very common family of viruses. All the common colds that we get are from the coronaviruses. But the coronaviruses, most of them, don't cause any major problems with morbidity or mortality. However, as I mentioned, there are two earlier coronaviruses that came on the scene but did not cause any major catastrophe like this one. Now, this one is called SARS-CoV-2. It's the second coronavirus, and this is the one that caused the disease called COVID-19. So one must distinguish between coronaviruses, the SARS-2, and the COVID-19. That is important to recognize. Now, one recognizes that these What do we know about these coronaviruses? As I said, they're relatively benign in most, but they do infect animals. And as we will discuss, where did this new virus come from? It is a big, big mystery. And I think the whole world wants to know where it started from. The two viruses that I mentioned earlier, the Middle East respiratory syndrome and the severe acute respiratory syndromes, the middle MERS was found mainly in the Middle East. It came probably from the bats to the camels. So don't stand next to a camel that sneezes because that virus is still present. However, it was very well contained and it did not spread. Now, severe SARS-1 also caused significant disease, but again, it was contained. But this coronavirus, which is SARS-2, has, as you know, afflicted millions and millions of people. 185 countries, 188 countries have now been involved. Even the Antarctica recently had COVID 19. So there's no doubt that this virus has the capacity to infect a majority of the population of this earth. Now, as you can see on the photograph, it is a very complicated virus, but it has these, it's a crown line appearance with these spikes. Now, the major issue is what is happening today. All viruses, every virus has the capacity to mutate, and that means it changes according to the number of infections it causes. So it has the capacity to change very rapidly. And if you look at the literature, there are at least 4,000 variants of this virus. But more recently, as I've listed here, it's in the United Kingdom, a new strain which has emerged, and it is infecting unusually large numbers of people, and it has large numbers of mutations. It has now gone into the United States, Canada, Australia, many, many, many countries. In fact, even in India now, they have shown that this virus is present, this new strain or variant of this virus. In Nigeria, there's another distinct variant strain. The $1 million question is definitely this strain is transmitted much easier. In fact, some people have suggested that it is 70 times more contagious, although the data is not completely in, but is highly, highly contagious. How rapidly it will spread, nobody knows, but it is in the United States. And unfortunately, in Colorado, for instance, there were an individual who had never gone anywhere, remained at home, he said, but he ended up with this new variant. Now, the other $1 million question is, will the vaccines work? So far, as far as we know, the vaccines do work in this new CO variant. So I hope it remains that way. But it's impossible to predict because just like influenza, the vaccines sometimes don't work. And the technology is wrapping emergently. So the question will come up in the future about these issues related to whether the vaccines will work. And I'm sure there'll be more discussion on that. Now, the coronavirus, I've already told you, is a new coronavirus. Where did it start? Well, obviously, it started in China, in the Hubei province, which is in central China, and Wuhan. And so far as we know, although there are many, many, many theories, and I think the WHO and other scientists are now going back to determine where did this virus come from. Obviously, there's a large seafood and live animal market. The SARS-1, which was in the Guangdong province, came from a civet cat. So This live animal market has many, many different types of animals. And it is possible that one of these animals was carrying this virus, which was transmitted to a human. Now, the way this spreads is just like flu. It's by respiratory droplets. These droplets can be very tiny or very large, and it is not known, depending on the contagion of the patient, how rapidly it spreads. But it's suggested that the contact is about 6 feet. Now, the new theories say it can float around in a room all over, and it can cause disease beyond 6 feet. So there's a lot of theories related, but it is through the respiratory droplet. How about touch? Yes, if you touch a surface that contains significant amount of virus and you put it on your nose or your mouth, the transmission can occur. So there's no doubt that most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, it is related to respiratory droplets. So whenever somebody coughs, these viruses disseminate just like flu. Now, what does it cause? Well, there's no doubt that just like flu, fever, cough, and sometimes difficulty in breathing. Now, obviously, if you have that, and this is mainly for the lay public, no matter what you have, it's impossible to predict whether you have the flu or you have the other 10 different viruses that are floating around, or whether you have COVID. So it is important to contact your healthcare provider and say, have you had exposure in close contact with somebody with COVID? That is clear. But they must make sure that the healthcare provider don't immediately go to the office. So make sure that you inform the healthcare provider and let him decide how he's going to manage your particular symptoms. It could be, as I said, fever, cough, and difficulty in breathing. Difficulty in breathing is definitely a major, major issue in most patients. Now, how do we test for it? Now, technology is evolving. The common ones are the PCR test, which is the polymerase chain reaction. It's a complicated test. It is through the nasopharynx. You get it, the same thing from the sputum, but it is the nasopharynx that has the highest yield of the virus. There are other tests which are antigen tests, but these tests have significant false negatives. There are some false positives. They are very rapid. Within 20 minutes, you can get it. Now, this morning, there was a technology, as I said, is called constantly evolving. From a Turkish university that said that within 10 seconds, they have a nanotechnology that can be positive for this virus through an immunofluorescent technique. Now, obviously, that is so far hearsay. We need published data that has been peer reviewed before we accept anything like that. So that is very clear. A lot of people are going to say, I have this technology or that technology. But the technology now is RT-PCR from the nasopharynx, the antigen test, and of course, this test that we do will also look at other respiratory viruses like influenza. Now, why is it important? Because influenza you can treat. There are a number of new drugs that you can treat for influenza, and they're very effective. So one needs to recognize that if you have a fever or cough or cold, even shortness of breath, you must get a complete panel looking for other virus, especially influenza, because that is a treatable virus. Now, people are talking about the serology. When the organism enters your system, what happens is that your body will produce antibodies. How useful are these antibodies? Well, the FDA has not approved any serological test. However, people have looked at antibody tests. All it tells you that you've had exposure to the virus. Are you protected? Nobody knows. So it is clear that we need more data. All we can say is that strongly suspect to have the SARS-2 COVID infection. But there's no way to tell whether you are protected from these antibodies. It's also not known how long these antibodies, they're called neutralizing antibodies. There are two types, IgG and IgM, but it's not known how long these antibodies last with the natural infection with SARS-2. So it's clear that we need more data at this time related to these antibody tests. Now, the epidemiology is clear. There's no doubt that racial and ethnic minorities experience much higher rates. There's a lot of debate going on related to whether this is Afro American or Hispanics. And in England, unfortunately, they have found probably people from South Asia, including Indians, probably have a higher morbidity and mortality. So there may be some issues related to that. Now, people have looked into this, but again, it's not clear because ethnicity data is not available all the time. They don't say that an Afro American or Indian or a Hispanic patient has come in with this morbidity. That data has to be collected. It may be related to other things. It's probably not genetic, probably. But the work environment, there's no doubt that people who work in certain environments have a higher risk of exposure. Economic inequality, that is well known, of the lower socioeconomic status. The neighborhood disadvantage. There are 10 people living in a small flat. Lack of health care. And unfortunately, also, people are now looking at comorbid conditions. It is no doubt that, for instance, we all know that South Asians have a much higher incidence of diabetes and sometimes heart disease. So there's no doubt that if you have that background of cardiac disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and of course you smoke heavily, which is not uncommon, you're going to have higher morbidity and mortality. Now, the incubation period is about 14 days. The median time is 4 to 5 days after the exposure. The symptom onset occurs. In one study that I looked at recently, it's 11.5 days. But it can be very variable depending on what the underlying morbidity of the patient is. It has been shown that you have morbid conditions, the incubation period can be very short. Now, how does it present? Everybody knows this, that once you get fever, cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle aches, headaches. It's just like flu. But one interesting thing is that loss of taste and smell. It attacks the olfactory nerves. And that is a very strange phenomena with this virus. So this is a clue that we always ask patients, have you lost your smell? And I can tell you that this is a significant point, say, from influenza. So if you have that, then you're going to lean more towards COVID rather than influenza. Then sore throat, congestion, diarrhea. Diarrhea can be significant. Luckily, 80% of the confirmed cases will have very mild illness. But there's no way to predict once you get the infection. You may start off with a mild infection, especially if you are elderly and if you have morbidity, and suddenly, very suddenly, you will deteriorate. That means the amount of oxygen that you're getting into your lungs will rapidly decrease. So one should not wait, please. In that setting, you need to contact your healthcare provider and make sure. Because in elderly people, we have seen people who waited and they have crashed in the ambulance, saying that, oh, I was feeling well, but suddenly this happened. Now, the clinical spectrum of this disease has been divided into 5 categories. Asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, people who are well have no symptoms. Mild illness, which I've told you, a little fever, cough and sore throat, little headache, muscle pain, but they don't have shortness of breath or x-rays that are positive. If you have that, then you go on to moderate illness. And that time your oxygen saturation will go down. In fact, I have suggested that you keep a pulse oximeter at home if you have a morbid condition, if you're elderly, and if you have shortness of breath. It'll tell you immediately what your oxygen levels are. And if your oxygen levels are below what should be 94, then you have a severe illness. That is number 4. And then critically, of course, this strange virus has the activity to cause all major end organ damage. It goes to the brain, it goes to the eyes, it goes to the heart, it goes to the liver, it goes to the gut, it goes to the muscles, it goes to the adrenals. So there's no doubt that multiple organ dysfunction is very well described now. And people have ended up with severe heart attacks. It causes severe vessel disease. There's no doubt. So the vessel disease that we have seen in these patients is frightening. Not only lungs now, all other end organs, please remember. And we've seen a number of patients who have had severe heart disease. They thought they were having a heart attack. So one needs to define very clearly that this can cause multiple problems. Now, reinfection is not normally seen, and I'm not going to talk too much about that. But this illness can go on till 3 months. It depends on your immune system, how rapidly it can clear the virus. But there's no doubt in some patients, number one, the virus can go on for a long time. Number two, you can occasionally get a reinfection. But it's not a common phenomena. But if you think you have a problem, you need to again communicate. Now, the clinical management is easy. Mild to moderate disease, you can probably sit at home and monitor very carefully if you're young and if you have no comorbidities. But with severe illness, elderly, obesity, lung disease, heart, diabetes, this should be monitored very, very carefully because the risk of progression is very severe and especially in the second week. First week, you're fine, you're running around. But in the second week, you may suddenly crash. Now, I'm not trying to overstate what I'm saying, but I would again emphasize that one needs to monitor this very carefully. So, mild to moderate disease, you can probably monitor, but it has to be case by case. Nobody can predict in an individual case because even in young people, we have seen occasionally sudden deterioration happen. You heard about the 41-year-old congressman. So he was absolutely healthy, but suddenly he crashed and unfortunately he passed away. This is from Louisiana. Very sad to know that. Now, outpatient management, everybody knows. There are several antivirals that have been tried. Most of the time, this is not available unless you have a very controlled setting. There are immune modulating drugs that are being used, and then antiviral antibodies, which I guess everybody knows about, which our president got, Regeneron. So one needs to recognize there are a lot of new studies that are coming out related to antivirals, which I've mentioned, immune modulating drugs, which are being extensively used, but under control setting. You can't walk into a hospital and say, I need it. You have to make sure that there is a data that we need to collect related to these drugs. But the red flags are very clear, and I want to mention these clearly. If your face becomes blue or your lips become blue, cold, clammy skin, coughing up blood, difficult to arouse, heartbeat, if your heart rate is more than 110, which you can measure very closely, urine output, new confusion, rash. Oh, we've seen a lot of rash, and we've written articles on the rash. Oxygen saturation, which I mentioned, the breathing capacity, severe pain, etc., and systolic blood pressure. And I think everybody should now have a blood pressure instrument at home. One needs to recognize that these may be the red flags, symptoms, and you must immediately work. Now, the clinical management is simple. One needs to make sure that in severe disease, you're admitted to a hospital, and the patient will work on that, and the doctors will work on that. And there is a lot of uh, now strict data available on how to evaluate these patients. But this is an evolving knowledge and controversies in the treatment of COVID 19. The only drug that has been approved so far is remdesivir, which is antiviral agent. The others are still being controlled and obviously not available in every hospital. One of the things that we have found is, as I said, thromboembolism, GI bleeding, the neuropathies, the myopathy, but the blood tends to become clotted. The clotting of the blood is a very important aspect. That's why we want to make sure that in patients with severe disease, all these guidelines are very carefully followed. And most hospitals, or in fact, all hospitals have strict guidelines that when a patient comes in, what investigation should be done and how are they going to manage those patients. So those guidelines are very strict.
Yes.
They
Thank
are
you, Dr. Kapila. Yes, very
okay.
nice.
Late sequelae quickly, very late sequelae. There is a post-infectious syndrome that I've mentioned, persistent symptoms, etc. Now, as I said, all these end organs can be involved, the lung, heart, renal, etc. The late sequelae is important to remember that even once the virus leaves you, the long-term effects can be very challenging. And even young people have ended up with some severe persistent symptoms. So one needs to recognize that. Last slide, and it's important to remember living things do not serve man alone. They do not follow all the laws that in the textbooks that we write. They're continuous, changing, interacting, adapting, and they're part of cycle. And this is not the last pandemic, by the way. And lastly, I think we'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kapila, for your valuable insight. Now I invite Dr. Suzanne Lee, who will be discussing the disease in children and teens. Dr. Lee is a professor of pediatrics at Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. She's internationally known for her work and is a member of the panel developing guidelines for management of COVID 19 related multi system inflammatory syndrome in children. Dr. Lee, please go ahead.
Okay, I think Dr. Capillo, can you stop sharing, please? Can you exit share screen?
I think stop the shares. Got it?
Yes, yes. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. I hope
Okay.
you will
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khosla, and thank you for allowing me to talk to you today about COVID-19 in children and teens and its impact. So this is an outline of what I'll be covering. So because of the time limitation, I can't go into depth, but I am providing links to more information and resources for people. So I'll be covering the pattern of COVID-19 infections in pediatrics, what you can do to protect your child, the consequences of the pandemic, and what you can do to help your child cope. So the pattern of COVID-19, as Dr. Kabila said, can vary a lot. Fortunately, the risk of infection is much lower in children than in adults, and they have a lower likelihood of having more serious infection. So they don't tend to go to the moderate or severe, they tend to be in the mild or asymptomatic. The hospitalization rate is over 20-fold lower, and the mortality rate similarly is 10 to 1,000-fold lower than for adults. However, if the child is hospitalized, 1 in 3 end up in the intensive care unit, and those less than 1-year-old are more likely to have a serious infection. What's concerning is that the number of pediatric cases is increasing. So this is showing you the number of children per 100,000 US population. And you could see that in November, December, the slope of the curve is going up. So there's been a 22% increase in the rate since December 10th to 24th, and that's faster than the general population. There's been 1 million more children that have been infected since mid-November, giving a total number of about 2 million versus 20 million for the US population. There's about 172 deaths, so much, much better than adults though. And so the COVID-19 infectious problems in children could be, as Dr. Kapila had described, could be flu-like symptoms. And so same as adults, they can get the loss of smell, but usually they're just in the mild category or they're asymptomatic. What's concerning is this more serious problem called MIS-C, or multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, which is likely a post-infectious immune response to the COVID. This disease is associated with a high risk of severe illness and hospitalization, but the good news is that there are treatment strategies available. So this MIS-C then tends to show up about 4 weeks after the COVID infection. And the child usually has an asymptomatic or mild infection, so they may not be aware that they were infected, but other family members at that time are sick or had exposure to COVID. If we test them, as Dr. Kapila had said, with the nasopharyngeal swab, it's usually negative at the time they present with MIS-C, but most of them have serology. They have COVID antibodies. And their symptoms can resemble that of Kawasaki's disease, which means they have fever, they have red eye, strawberry tongue, red tongue, cracked red lips, red hands and feet, which are swollen, rashes. They often have severe gastrointestinal symptoms, so nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain. And some of them have been taken to the OR because it's thought that they have appendicitis. It can be that severe. Usually they don't have respiratory symptoms like you see with the typical COVID infection. This MIS-C can affect many organs. So a big concern is that it affects the heart in most of the children. And so intensive care unit care is often needed to support the heart as well as to provide respiratory support. The diagnosis is based upon blood tests, echocardiogram, and clinical features. And most recover with treatment, but there is a 2% mortality rate, and there is also the risk for permanent damage to these vital organs. The MIS-C occurrence follows the time course of COVID-19 positivity. So this is from the CDC, and it shows you the initial pandemic of COVID in the United States. So this is March to May. And so the COVID cases were rising and peaked in mid-April and then started to decline in the Northeast. The MIS-C cases lagged behind, so they actually peaked in mid-May, about a month later, and then they came down in late May, not shown here in the Northeast. COVID cases then rose across the rest of the United States, and the MIS-C followed the same pattern, appearing about a month later. What's very worrisome is that COVID cases are rising all over the US, so it's likely that the MIS-C peak is going to be even higher than what we saw initially, and will be all over the United States. So how do you protect your child from COVID-19? Dr. Bolani will be talking more about this, but the key message is to stop the spread of the virus. Most children that were infected from their family. So masks for everyone, 2 years and up, social distancing and good hygiene. Maintain good health because that boosts your immune system, and vaccination when available. So the idea of the mask is that people are not aware that they are infected, and then they're spreading the virus with the droplets, which can be caught very effectively by the mask. And so if you mask, but the asymptomatic person is not masked and you're over 2 meters apart, it's very unlikely you're going to get those infectious droplets. If you're 2 meters, the rate goes down a little bit, but still very good, and even less. So the mask is preventing most of those infectious droplets from reaching you. If everyone masks, then the asymptomatic person, their droplets are getting caught, and you're not getting, as you have less risk of getting them. So it's really essential everyone mask. And this is a study showing that the masks really cut down on the droplet transmission and the aerosol transmission. So what are the consequences of the pandemic on children and teens? So as you all know, many aspects of life, health, and development have been impacted. Over 90% of the world's enrolled learners are out of education. So that's 1.5 billion young people affected. And there's been poor health among the young. So more children are hungry. Many are having less nutritious meals. There's less physical activity because everyone's sheltering in place. And they're spending more time on the screen and sedentary activities as a consequence. They're spending less time outside, and they're having more irregular sleep patterns. And children are stressed worldwide. So studies of children in the early pandemic times, March and April, in 3 countries, Italy, Spain, and Portugal, showed that a third of them were restless, nervous, worried, uneasy, anxious, and a third were lonely. A quarter of them were afraid of the COVID-19, with boys seeming to have more anxiety, mood and behavioral issues, cognitive and sleep changes. Over 40% of the children were irritable, which led to a third of them arguing more with their families than before. Over half of them were bored. Physical activity went down to less than 30 minutes for most of them in confinement. It was better for those that had access to a garden or terrace, and screen time increased to over 3 hours for most of these children. In Canada, they looked at physical activity, and so only 5% and less than 1% of the older kids were meeting the physical activity guidelines, as opposed to 13 to 14% pre-COVID. And this is from a local New Jersey high school newspaper saying COVID-19 has increasing effects on mental health. So the kids are well aware of these problems. So there are many consequences to not having in-person school. And this is not just from COVID, this is just from studying what happens in other pandemics or other situations. And so there's a loss of structure to the days. There's less peer and teacher interactions, meaning there's going to be poor social development for the kids. And especially if everyone's wearing a mask, they're not observing the person's face, so they're not picking up that valuable skill. There's a lack of resource materials, meaning generally less effective learning via online classes. There's a higher rate of boredom, and this lack of interaction and resource materials leads to less innovative thinking and academic engagement. The children have less access to services such as counseling and other support from the school. So there is unfortunately an increase in abuse going on in some families. So the children have less, they're at risk for having mental and physical abuse. And there's a loss of the access to the free meals for those children that are in need. So what can you do to help? So parents are currently the best available resource for their children at this time, and you can do a lot. So you want to structure the day to maintain a daily routine. You want to encourage physical activity and outdoor time, and you want to model how to manage your feelings. Everyone is stressed, okay? And part of that stress comes from constant exposure to COVID news and information. So you really want to limit your child's exposure to this. Give them more hugs, say, I love you, listen to them carefully so you can understand what exactly they're concerned about, what they're afraid of, and address that. Provide nutritious meals and snacks. So protein-rich breakfast and dinner, omega-3 fatty acids are thought to support mood, which comes from fish and plants. Beans, less fast food and junk food to avoid spikes and slumps in their emotions, and less processed food to limit salt and fat. So structuring the day, you want to wake up, have breakfast at the set time, decide where everyone can do their work effectively, so that's their space. List times for learning, exercise breaks. So younger children, for instance, might have 20 minutes of class assignment, 10 minutes of physical activity. List your hours if you're working so your child knows when your workday is finished. Schedule those nutritious lunches and snacks throughout the day, as well as rest and play breaks. Try to have dinner together so you can discuss the day, go over what your child's feeling, and try to spend time in the evening together. So it might be enjoying a movie, doing a puzzle, playing a game, doing physical activity or craft. Lots of crafts have surged in this time. And then maintain a normal bedtime routine to ensure adequate sleep. So it's really not up to the child, it's up to you to set that. And no screen time for 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Talk to your child about COVID. Be honest and simple. It's okay to say you don't know. Use reliable sources. So the Center for Disease Control, World Health Organization, American Academy of Pediatrics are listed here. There's also a free COVID storybook for children, 6 to 11 from the World Health Organization. This is a picture from it. And so that could help. It does discuss difficult issues like illness and dying. Encourage physical activity. Being outdoors has many beneficial effects on mood and thinking. So, sunlight and nature exposure have been found to improve these items. Outdoor physical activity is also associated with the child being more active in general, even indoors. And when the parents are active with their child, it's found that the child is more likely to do more activity, to be active longer. The targets by the American Academy of Pediatrics and World Health Organization are 15 minutes of active time while awake per hour for the 3 to 5-year-olds, 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity per day for 6 to 18-year-olds. And there are a lot of resources. So this is just listing some of them for trying to do activities or suggestions for things to do outside. So I encourage you to try to look for them. This one sounded interesting. It's a Hops. It's an app which sort of tracks and makes it a game of being active. You want to support your child's mental health. So encourage them to connect with their friends, but limit the entertainment screen time to 1 to 2 hours per day. It's good if you can stay in the background to monitor their social media to be sure it's safe, because we don't want to get into cyberbullying or abuse situations. Really, really important to listen and talk to them. And sites that provide tools that might help or increase resilience are listed here. Okay. So signs your child may need more support are, for the younger child, a regression in their skills and milestones, trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, separation anxiety, tantrum, sleep issues, new onset of stomach pains. Teens are feeling depressed, hopeless, anxious, or angry. They lose interest in texting or video chatting, lose interest in schoolwork and other interests they have. And there is a free disaster distress helpline available all the time in over 100 languages. And that's for emotional distress related to natural, like COVID disasters. It's confidential. And so that's something. And then for, if you're really worried that your child might hurt themselves, there is a national suicide prevention line that's also free and confidential and available in Spanish. So then to summarize, COVID-19 infections in children are less common and usually less severe, but MIS-C is very serious, potentially life-threatening, so important to get evaluated. And signs of that could be fever, severe abdominal pain, really feeling out of it. It's important to get evaluated early because treatments are effective at an early time. Masking, social distancing, good hygiene are the best ways to protect your child. The pandemic has caused enormous disruptions with serious impacts on education, health, normal development, and mental well-being. But there's a lot you can do to help your child. So set that regular schedule, plan physical activities, ideally aiming for 60 minutes per day for the 6 to 18-year-olds. Outdoor time, also very valuable. Limit exposure to the pandemic news and social media. Encourage them to stay in touch with their friends and family. It's a great opportunity for families to get closer together, build some group activities together. So you want to listen to them and model the behavior you want them to have. So namaste, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. It was very, very informative. Next, actually, before we move on to the next speaker, I would like all of you to keep sending your questions via Zoom on the chat function. Next, we have Dr. Bindu Balani, an associate professor of medicine and infectious disease specialist at Hackensack University Medical Center. She has been in the front line since the pandemic began. In fact, she treated the first case of COVID-19 in the state of New Jersey. She'll be giving us an overview of the COVID-19 vaccine as well as prevention of the disease. Bindu, go ahead, please, Dr. Balani.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Having gone through the adult and the children manifestations of this particular disease, I'm here as a beacon of hope here with the vaccine coming up very shortly, having started already with the healthcare workers in this last few weeks. And then hopefully we'll be rolling out to the public very shortly by the spring of this year. This particular vaccine is going to be the hope for our control of this particular pandemic going forward, with the ability to hopefully decrease the transmission risk. In addition, with definitely what we see right now is decrease in the severity of illness. Having going forward, we hope that this particular vaccination will be accepted by the community, given the fact that the vaccines itself is not going to be saving lives, but the vaccinations will. So this is the data from the global epidemic of this pandemic of this particular disease as of yesterday afternoon, where we have 81 million confirmed cases and nearly 1.8 million deaths that's been recorded worldwide. So it is a major pandemic that definitely needs to be limited in its course, given the fact that we've seen such severity of disease over this particular disease factor. It's been about a year since we've had this virus floating around since last December 19th, when the first case was first diagnosed as the Wuhan COVID-19 disease. As Dr. Kapila was mentioning regarding the coronaviruses, all of these coronaviruses, there are quite a few of the coronaviruses that cause human respiratory diseases. But this particular coronavirus, I really want to kind of delve a little bit more into the disease manifestations, because based upon this particular disease.
Sorry, are you sharing a screen?
I am.
We are not seeing your screen, so it's not in a share.
Oh, I am so sorry.
Somebody sent us a text because they saw the screen in the beginning. So thank you. Thank you for making the point, whoever did that. Thank you.
Is it sharing now?
No, not at this point. Do you have a dual screen or something?
How about now?
Yeah, now we see it. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for whoever pointed it out. Now I just want to make sure that I can make it large for everybody to see. Is this good? Are we sharing now? Okay, perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned, this was a global epidemic. I do not know when it happened that we couldn't share, but this is a global epidemic with nearly 81 million people affected worldwide, as well as 1.8 million deaths that have occurred thus far in this 1 year worth of this disease pandemic. So as I was mentioning before, I really do want to talk about how the disease is caused by this particular virus, in the hope that how we can then develop the immunity to it. So the vaccine is a coronavirus, which is an RNA virus with a capsule that has spikes on it. These spike proteins are the ones that are bound to the ACE receptor, which then allows the virus to enter into the cell. Once it enters into the cell, it releases its mRNA, which then translates into various proteins, forms new baby virons, and expels out. This particular virus that gets expelled out is then picked up by the antigen-presenting cell. In other words, these are our host defense cells that eat up this particular virus, take it to the lymph nodes, where the lymph nodes then makes more B cells and T cells, which are body's host immune response mediated cells. The B cells produce the antibodies, and the T cells help in killing this particular virus and getting this particular infected cell destroyed. The antibodies that are formed are against the spike proteins, amongst one of them is a spike proteins, which help bind to the receptor. So again, this particular binding site is what it has to be protected against the invasion of this particular virus into the cell immunity. So this long-term, long-lived memory B and T cells that recognize the virus can then move around in the body for months and years to come, providing immunity. This is our hope. Exactly as Dr. Kapila mentioned, we do not know exactly how long this particular antibody is going to stay, but at least in the clinical trials that we have so far in the Moderna vaccine trial, a 90-day neutralizing antibody was able to be picked up, even though the data is only up to 3 months. These particular trials are ongoing trials up to 2 years. So we'll have long-term data keep accruing as we go forward. So based upon the antibody formations, various vaccines are formed to be able to trigger this immune response. There are more than 90 to 100 vaccines that are being developed. There are some which have obviously received early authorization use in the month of December. And there's quite a few more that are going to be coming up very shortly in the spring of this year. So what are the various ways that the virus vaccines can be made? One, you can inject the target vaccine directly after it has been made safe. So you run the particular target, you make it inactivated, make it non-replicating, inject into the body to be in the hope that your body recognizes this virus, makes an appropriate antibody response. The second way is by forming viral vector vaccines. What does it mean? It means that they take the mRNA out of the coronavirus, they inject it into, for example, for the AstraZeneca one, they inject it into the chimpanzee's adenovirus. It is the adenovirus is a very common, the pink eye virus that we normally get conjunctivitis with, is the same one, but only affecting chimpanzees, so it's not going to affect the human body. So it takes the mRNA of the coronavirus, injects it into the chimpanzee adenovirus, and then you inject that particular virus into our body. Again, the hope being that the body is going to see this particular viral vector, make antibodies against it, and then again present it to the antigen presenting cell, and then forward making the B cells and T cells appropriately to it. The third way is the nucleic acid vaccines. So there are two different types. Either it could be a DNA virus vaccine or it could be an RNA vaccine, where you take the target virus, put it into cell, create specific target proteins, and therefore make this particular antigen presenting cells. The fourth way is a protein-based vaccine, where basically you take small pieces of this particular spike proteins and then just put them in empty shells of target virus directly into the body, making the antibodies. Now, all of these vaccine vectors or the viral vaccines that are made, they all lead to the same antigen presenting cell, just the way the human disease is caused. So the vaccines kind of go back to the antigen presenting cell, which is a macrophages, which is the body's host defense against any of these foreign materials, to make the appropriate B and T cells. These B cells lead to the antibody formation, and the T cells lead to the different types of natural killer cells that help fight the disease process. So the goal being that all of these vaccines are going to be aimed to trigger the immune response that ultimately, when your body sees the actual virus itself, you already have the armamentarium to be able to fight this particular virus by making the antibodies against it. If the body already has antibodies against the spike proteins cannot touch or enter the cell because that receptor binding formation is not allowed. So if the receptor is not being bound, the virus cannot enter the cell and therefore decrease the rate of infectiousness down the road. So that's the whole goal of making the vaccine, right? So now, what is the current vaccines that we have available? So the two vaccines that came out in the month of December were the Pfizer's BioNTech mRNA vaccine and the Moderna's mRNA vaccine. So these are both the mRNA vaccines. As I mentioned before, the mRNA of the spike of the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 virus, that encodes specifically for the spike protein is taken out of the virus, made into, it is basically bound with a fat globule, a lipid nanoparticle, a fat globule, made it into an injection, and that is injected into your muscle cells. The muscle cells will then release the mRNA, which does not enter, it's very important, it does not enter the host DNA. And therefore, given the fact that it stays only in the cytoplasm of the body's muscle cells, it does not cause any alteration of the DNA. There's one particular misinformation that is floating around in the social media that these mRNA vaccines can alter the human DNA. It does not do so because it does not enter the nucleus. The mRNA that is released into the cell then encodes for the spike proteins. The spike protein antibodies are formed, goes to the antigen presenting cells up into your lymph node to the site ipsilateral to the same site as where you got the vaccine. So usually the underarm or the left neck on the side of the vaccine site will be a little bit swollen in about 2 to 3 weeks after you take the vaccine, but that's a good thing because that's where the lymph nodes are being activated to make your B cells and your T cells specific for that particular vaccine. So these are the two that got approved in the US, and the one that is approved in Europe yesterday was actually day before yesterday is the AstraZeneca one. The Johnson & Johnson is still anticipated to come in the spring of this year. So the AstraZeneca one, as I mentioned before, is a viral vector vaccine. So it's a non-replicating viral vaccine. So there's another misconception that's present in the social media is that you're giving a virus and that virus is going to cause disease in you. Answer is no, because it's a non-replicating. It does not replicate. And it is this particular gene that encodes for the spike protein is taken out, put into the chimpanzee's adenovirus vector. That is then put into the vaccine and given to you. Again, a similar mechanism where the mRNA, again, does not enter to the nucleus, goes into the cytoplasm, makes the antibodies, spills out, and has the immune response over a period of time. So both of these mRNAs and the non-replicating viral vector vaccines are currently available in Europe. All three of them are available. In US, only the mRNA ones are available at this current time. So are these viral vaccines safe, right? Safety is the main priority of the vaccine approval. Of course, safety and efficacy are both important. The way that one of the other misconceptions that has come up is the fact that these vaccines are produced very fast, and are these really safe? How can these vaccines be produced? So one of the questions that was there is, will it be done for influenza? Actually, that's an important question because it gives a segue into my talk here, because these mRNA vaccines are not new. Actually, mRNA vaccines for influenza, for the avian influenza, was made in 2017, where they actually had increased, they had phase 1 and phase 2 studies where they actually showed immunogenicity against influenza also. It has been used also for the Ebola virus. It has been used for various cancer gene therapies. So the mRNA vaccines actually have been around. mRNA technique has been around since 1990s. The reason why it is not as widespread up until this far is because of it's safe and it is efficacious, yes, but it's also the delivery of this particular vaccine is a little bit difficult. As you've heard about the cold stage, the cold chain requirements and the storage requirements, the pragmatics of this delivery system is so difficult that it's not as widespread. You cannot anticipate having a Pfizer vaccine in the rural US where there is no 70 degrees, minus 70 degrees freezers. So again, the access to this particular vaccine is going to be very limited at this particular current time, just because the modes of delivery is affected. So even though it was effective for the avian influenza, it wasn't really that widespread because again, you have to be able to spread the vaccine to every particular part that is requiring it. So the vaccines is around for a while. This particular technology is around for this while. We had the vaccine gene genetic code available in January in a matter of 6 weeks. We had the mRNA vaccines identified to be made. The side effects of these vaccines usually occur in the first 6 weeks of vaccination. So therefore, the FDA required at least 8 weeks of safety monitoring before they would be able to see any of the data for it. The monitoring of the safety will continue because this particular trial, as I mentioned before, is a 2-year-long commitment that we've given. That based upon these 2 years of data, we will be getting accruing data on long-term longevity of the antibodies, how long is the immunogenicity going to last. All that is going to be collected proactively and prospectively over these next few weeks, over the next few years. Also, given the fact that it has been used in nearly 70,000 patients between the two vaccines, between the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, the safety has been pretty robust in these particular trials. It has been used on diverse populations, as Dr. Kapila was saying, that the racial and ethnic hit has been so rampant and so different that we want to make sure that this particular vaccine works for even those who are hit hard. So we have seen a very diverse participant population in these vaccine trials, and we do know that it works in all of these particular phases. So how is it that normally when it takes years of vaccine development, how is this particular vaccine being available in a matter of 6 to 8 months since its first onset of the first trial? So the most important thing is the monies that go along with it, right? So majority of times, the data that is collected from the phase 1 on safety to phase 2 of safety and immunogenicity to phase 3 of clinical trials in thousands of patients is a very linear data formations. But in the case of this particular pandemic, the Operation Warp Speed has definitely helped by putting in the monies in manufacturing and getting these particular trials up and running very fast, very quickly. The financial risk is what has always delayed the onset of these vaccines in age-old trials. But given the fact that this is a pandemic where we really need to have the vaccines available very quickly, the preclinical to safety, the immunogenicity, and the phase 3 trials have happened pretty much in parallel. So once we had a little bit of data on the phase 1, we started the phase 2 simultaneously and then started the phase 3 simultaneously, even before the phase 2 data was completely at risk. Safety was never a concern. Shortening did not lead to a mishap on the safety guns. It was just the financial risk that goes along with not being able to see what the answers are was taken up by the Operation Warp Speed. And therefore, we are able to have the data of safety and efficacy simultaneously along with the production facilities. So production actually started for these vaccines in July, even before the phase 3 studies came up. So if the phase 3 studies had come back as a negative outcome, it would have been the loss of the government and not of this particular sponsor. And therefore, we are able to have this particular vaccine come out faster rather than not. So it's not a safety or efficacy loss. It is just a financial risk that was taken by somebody else. So we've heard about this word EUA, right? I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Since March, when the first hydroxychloroquine came along with Plaquenil came along as the first EUA medicine. EUA is basically a use of a product, and it doesn't have to be a vaccine. It could be a medication, it could be a test, it could be a different modality of treatment, anything that helps to prevent a public health emergency in a pandemic situation gets an EUA authorizations by the HHS. And it is a shorter process, but no steps are skipped related to the safety. And the FDA and will assess if the vaccine is known and potential benefits outweigh the risks of this particular disease. And EUA does not imply that the authorization was done and that the vaccine safety is still kept abreast of the things. Once a particular vaccine gets an EUA, it still has to apply. Once all the phase 3 studies are completed, it will still have to apply for the licensure product down the road. So EUA is just a short-term gap. It still has to be followed by the licensure authorizations once all the safety data is collected. So what are the efficacy of the current vaccines? So, right, so the two studies. The first one is the Pfizer's data, which is the BioNTech 16-2b2 study group, where they found that in the placebo is nothing but, so in all these trials, it was a placebo-based trial. So what is a placebo? Placebo is an inert object. In case of both of these trials, in both of these trials, the placebo group basically received saline. So it's just salt water that was given that does not really have any immunogenicity against this particular vaccine. In the AstraZeneca one, they used the meningococcal vaccine as their placebo. So it was a different vaccine that was given. But in the case of Pfizer, they used the saline versus a placebo group, and they found that the cases of COVID-19 was nearly 170 in the ones who received the placebo, versus only 9 cases of COVID vaccine were identified in the vaccine arm. In the cases of severe disease, where the patient had to be hospitalized, there were 9 patients in the placebo group versus only 1 in the vaccine arm, showing the efficacy of this particular vaccine at nearly 94%. In the case of the mRNA vaccine from Moderna, there were 30,000 participants, half of them in the placebo arm and half of them in the mRNA group. Again, in that arm also, there were 185 patients who had COVID in the placebo group versus only 11 in the Moderna's vaccine group. In the cases of severe COVID, also there were 30 patients in the placebo arm versus 0 in the vaccine arm. Again, going to show that the severity of disease definitely was markedly lower in the vaccine arm, and overall, the rate of the disease also was much, much lower. In the case of the AstraZeneca, which has just been approved by EUA in the EU, they also showed that in the placebo arm, they had 101 patients with COVID versus 30 patients in the AstraZeneca arm. In the severe COVID, again, there was a big discrepancy. Again, 10 in the placebo arm and 0 in the AstraZeneca vaccine arm. Again, showing a very good efficacy rate. Now, one piece of information, like again, as soon as you see the 72%, we get, we are thrown off with the 90% and 95% with the mRNAs, and then we see a 72%, and we feel that it's not a great percentage, right? So yes, the mRNA vaccine arms are fantastic with the 95% efficacy rates, but you have to, I kind of alluded this earlier also, but you have to take that particular efficacy with the ability to take that mRNA vaccine to each and every person in the globe, right? With that particular cold storage requirements, with that instability of that particular vaccine, you are not going to be able to vaccinate people in the suburbs. You're not going to be vaccinating people in the hot countries where the cold storage is next to 0. So the vaccine availability throughout the world is definitely going to be limited with the mRNA vaccine. So we really do need vaccines like the AstraZeneca and fantastic results with the 72% EUA, 72% efficacy rate that we are seeing here. So we do need other agents that are going to come out. We do need the other vaccines that are going to come out that are going to be able to be used in masses throughout the globe. So we really are looking forward to the Johnson & Johnson one as well as the Merck one, which may be a viral adjuvant stability drug, which is going to increase the ability of the vaccine to be kept at room temperature. So we really do need to have further technologies that's going to be coming out to be able to vaccinate throughout the world. So it's fantastic that this particular drug has come out, this particular vaccine has come out, which is going to be, it is the cheapest of the lot. Just to give an idea, the AstraZeneca is going to be about $2 to $4 per dose versus the $37 or $28 per dose of the Pfizer and the Moderna, respectively. So it's a big cost difference. It's a big difference in the refrigeration of this particular disease. So again, all of those things regarding delivery of the vaccine to the public is also going to come into play when the vaccines come into the course.
Dr. Balani, we're running short of time. If you can.
Oh, yes, sorry. Okay, so let me just quickly go through it. It is a 2-dose vaccine. It's a prime and a boost phenomena. It has to be 2 doses, 3 to 4 weeks apart. The vaccines cannot be interchanged, so please return back to the same place to get the same second shot. They should have the dose held for you. How long does it last, and how long do you get protected for it? Protection occurs 1 to 2 weeks after the second dose. And how long? It is unknown as yet. The neutralizing antibodies we know are present for at least 3 months. As we get more data over the next 2 years of these particular trials, we'll have more as we go along. What if I've already had COVID-19? It is still safe. It may provide a longer and better protection against a vaccine. Just a note, we are seeing a slightly bit more on the side effect profile in those patients who've had COVID virus vaccine, because the priming has already been happened. And I think the boosting phenomena can occur with the first phase. What if I have COVID antibodies? As Dr. Kapila mentioned, we really do not know what those antibodies that we test for are against, so they may not be protective. So it is important that you take the vaccines. What if you're pregnant? Can it cause harm? It is still safe. It does not enter the placenta. On the other hand, it goes into the muscles. It dies in the muscles. So it really does not travel anywhere but your deltoids. What if I'm immunocompromised? You are at a higher risk. You must take the vaccines. What are the reactogenicities that you may be careful about? Fatigue, fever, muscle pains, chills, nausea, headaches, feeling tired and fatigued for about 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours after the first and the second dose is option. Bell's palsy and facial filler pain and swelling has been noted in some of these vaccine trials. Please get accurate information from the CDC sites. Please do not disseminate misinformation from the various social media. It is very important that you get the right information and disseminate the right information to people. Do I still need to wear a mask after I take the vaccine? Answer is yes, in big letters, because similar to the other vaccines, a very large number of patient population in the community will need to be vaccinated before the transmission can be eliminated enough to be able to stop the masks. So hopefully this time next year, we may be without the masks, but up until then, till all the people, nearly 70 to 90% of community gets vaccinated, we still need to be having a protection on it. One single slide of prevention. Please do these things to prevent any respiratory viruses, be it flu, be it COVID-19. Wear in public, wear a mask, practice social distancing, wash hands frequently. Just all you need is soap and water. You don't need bleach. You don't need, major solvents to really do so. Avoid touching your nose, eyes, and mouth, because that's where the entry of the virus occurs. We don't realize how many times we touch our face unknowingly. Clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces. Stay home. Avoid contact with others, especially when sick. So with that, I got my COVID vaccine virus, and hope everybody will step forward for the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Balani. Thank you very much. COVID-19, besides causing the pain and complications of the disease, it has caused fear and isolation. To discuss the emotional and behavioral aspect of isolation, we have Dr. Raghunath Mehta, a distinguished fellow of American Psychiatric Association, who's also on the faculty of Mount Sinai, as well as Columbia University, and a consultant at Rockland Psychiatric Center. Dr. Mehta, it's all yours. Hope we are running, you can finish it up in 10, 15 minutes. I know we are running short of time.
I will try my best. I don't want to, prolong too much, but I do want to thank you, Dr. Savita, and your team for putting this great program together. And I really, really enjoyed the presentations by Dr. Kapila, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Balani. They have been very erudite, very up to date. I learned a lot. So here we go into the emotional world. The dominant emotion last 9 months has been one of fear and anxiety. Of all the three primitive emotions that we have, the fear, the anger, and the love, fear is probably the most dominant emotion that never fails to surface during the times of danger. And anxiety has been pervasive. It's the anxiety about person getting the COVID-19 and dying from it, anxiety about member of the family getting COVID-19 and dying from it. It's anxiety about not being able to see the people who are in the hospital. I have treated people whose mother, father, sisters have died, and their biggest regret and their biggest guilt is that during their last time, they were not able to be with the members of the family whom they loved. They could not say how wonderful their life has been with them. They could not express their gratitude, and they are left with a lot of regret and a lot of guilt. And that's a subject by itself. Um, the anxiety has also been there about business, about finances, and especially if people are financially strapped, it increases their level of anxiety. Anxiety has basically torn apart emotionally, and it has caused a lot of damage, both physically as well as mentally. And I'll try to cover as briefly as I can. Okay. Some people feel anxious from morning until evening. The only time they don't feel anxious is when they go to bed, when they sleep. And as soon as they get up in the morning, the anxiety takes over. And some people are not even able to sleep well at night. So that's another problem. Sleeplessness, sleep problems have been one of the features of this pandemic. Now, direct expression of anxiety is fairly easy to understand. Direct expression has to do with people feel keyed up, they feel restless, they feel tense, they're worrying all the time, and not being able to relax, not being able to enjoy the normal life. There's a muscle tension, there's difficulty in attention and concentration in doing any kind of sustained work, difficulty sleeping, they get irritable, impatient. If you disturb them too much, they can even become explosive. That's a direct expression of the anxiety. But it is the indirect expression that is invisible and that also does a lot of damage. Uh, what the anxiety does is it exacerbates a lot of medical conditions. So somebody's hypertension, it tends to increase their high blood pressure. It tends to promote binge eating, binge drinking, and putting on the weight, which is easy during the pandemic years, doesn't do any favors because it basically um, increases the blood sugar. If people have sleep apnea, if people have gastroesophageal reflux disease, it make those conditions worse. Um, it can stimulate irritable bowel syndrome. It can stimulate psoriasis. In skin diseases, it can cause flare up of psoriasis and in rosacea. I'm not saying that anxiety causes these conditions. What I'm trying to say is it increases their symptoms, and people are not aware as to why their blood pressure has gone up or why their acidity has gone up. I mean, there has been a raid on antacids in drugstores. The place where I live, in the drugstore, they ran out of all the antacids because people have been using them. And this is mostly because anxiety has increased their acidity. Okay. So what is the difference between anxiety and depression? So anxiety people are still hopeful that they might be able to conquer this disease. They might be able to come out at the other end. Whereas in depression, there is resignation. The sense of futility takes over, sense of hopelessness takes over, and people basically feel resigned that the life has practically gone away from them. They can stay in bed without doing anything. They are not able to do the usual activities. They feel tired. They feel useless. They feel worthless. That their thoughts of death and dying. I think my earlier speakers spoke about suicide. One of them also gave a number to call, the National Suicide Hotline. Moderate to severe depression inevitably will cause um, the thoughts about suicide. And I think people at that point in time really need to get onto either their primary care physician, their psychiatrist, emergency room, or call the National Suicide Hotline. The third thing that's happening is, before I go into that, the third thing that happens is that's the panic attacks. That's a concentrated form of anxiety that takes place episodically. And what actually happens in those panic attacks is that people feel a chest discomfort, they feel chest pain, they can get shortness of breath, they can sweat, they can have a lot of anxiety. And in reality, it can be very hard to distinguish it from a genuine heart attack. until the time EKG is done, until the time the cardiac enzymes are run. And of course, the EKG and cardiac enzymes are normal in panic attacks, whereas they're abnormal in the heart attack. So moving on, the PTSD. Usually people get post-traumatic stress disorder when they have gone through a traumatic situation. Most of the PTSD came into prominence, or the awareness of PTSD came into prominence during the Vietnam War. But over a period of time, we have come to realize that people can get PTSD even without being there. So some people are very fearful, some people are overly imaginative, and they place themselves in emergency rooms, in the ICU, on the ventilators. They imagine being dying, and if you are doing that over and over again, you're watching the TV and you're watching those scenes of people being on ventilators, people dying, you do it over and over there, and you put yourself there over and over there, you begin to then develop the PTSD symptoms, even you have never been there. And those PTSD symptoms have to do with the intrusive thoughts, they have to do with the nightmares, with the flashbacks, the feelings of intense psychological distress, and that get mixed with anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. The other thing that's happening behaviorally is people have been drinking a lot and eating a lot. So people have been drinking alcohol to calm their nerves. They've been drinking alcohol to address the anxiety. They've been drinking to sleep. And there have been exponential increase in the terms of alcohol use. Similarly, there has been increase in the use of substances. Unfortunately, in our country, last few years, the heroin deaths have basically gone up from year after year, but they used to be around 50 to 60,000 a year. According to CDC data, their last recorded data is showing that the number of deaths that have increased is up to 81,000. Okay. And most of these deaths are now related to the synthetic opioids. We talk about heroin, but I'm also going to talk about OxyContin and fentanyl. And these are the drugs that people obtain illegally. They are not the medications that you are prescribing in a controlled manner for a limited number of days. These are the medications that are available out in the market, and you don't know what they are mixed with, and people are becoming, addicted to it and dying from it. Believe it or not, this pandemic has caused extraordinary amount of anxiety in the people. Some people felt that, there could be a loss of law and order, and there had been exponential buying of the guns, the handguns. And actually, the rate of violence has increased in this country in different ways. Every year, there are 40 to 50,000 homicides in this country. But actually what happens is when people buy the guns to protect themselves from others, during the time of despair and during the time of depression, they turn those guns onto themselves. So close to 24,000 to 25,000 people have successful suicides through the use of guns. Okay. What other things pandemic has done? The people are bored at home, they don't have much things to do. And rather than to indulge into creative, nice activities, they get into some of the more troubling activities, and internet gambling is one of them. There has been explosion of internet gambling. It's very easy to get into internet gambling, and it's very easy to rake up a lot of losses. That then would lead to a lot of depression and then the suicidal thoughts. I also want to talk to you a little bit about people who are cognitively impaired. It has been very hard for the people who have elderly people who already have some cognitive impairment. You see, we have 5 senses, and through eyes, through ears, through taste, through smell, through hugging, through embracing, the use of 5 senses and the brain keeps on reminding us, it sends us reminders so that our cognitive capacities stay intact. When you are deprived of your 5 senses, you're no longer able to use them, and there's a sensory deprivation. It basically begins to affect the memory and the recall. And it has been very hard for the people who have been kind of cognitively impaired. Since the time is short, I'll go very, very quickly into what we can do. Okay. I told Dr. Khosla that it's very hard to do everything in 15 minutes. But believe me, I will take another 2 or 3 more minutes. Okay, so in the terms of treatments, first thing that I can mention to you is you've got to minimize isolation. We are human beings. We need our 5 senses in order to function. And the sensory deprivation does not do us any favors. In fact, there's plenty of evidence that the sensory deprivation stimulates stress hormones. I don't have the time right now. You all know catecholamines, cortisol, thyroxine, of which the cortisol is about the worst in terms of if there's a sustained increase of cortisol in the body, it does a lot of damage. Okay, I will not go any further than that. We also have a need for a great deal of affiliation, family affiliation, social affiliation, religious affiliation, club affiliation, work affiliation. And when we are deprived of all these affiliations, it takes the toll on our mind, on our brain. So first thing I'm going to emphasize is please stay socially connected. How do we do that at the time of the pandemic? You have to really do it through the virtual means. Through the virtual means, whether you use FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, WebEx, whatever, you need to stay connected with the family, with your workmates, with your friends, with your religious organizations, with your club members. You really need to stay connected as though this is a new way of doing things. You really need to do that. Other thing that I'm going to discuss, and I'm going to leave it more for my successive speaker, is the relaxation. Even before the pandemic, the person dealing with a lot of anxiety and panic, I was telling people that you need to take at least 20 minutes. You sit down, you relax your body and mind, you take a deep breath in, you hold it as comfortably as you can, and then you let it go out. And please do it 20 minutes in the morning and do it 20 minutes in the evening. No fancy stuff. Simply do these breathing exercises. And why is it important coming from an MD? I tell you why is it important, because we all have autonomic nervous systems. And our sympathetic nervous system, because of the prolonged anxiety, has gone into a sympathetic hyperdrive. And we need to calm it down. And simply doing the breathing exercises twice a day, it will calm it down. It won't happen in one day, but definitely it will happen in days and weeks to come. And I've seen it in a lot of my patients. Okay. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about very briefly structure the day. Unstructured the day when you're sitting in front of the sofa watching TV from morning until evening, that doesn't do any good to your brain. It doesn't do any good to your mood. That's the unstructured activity. Unstructured activities like swimming in the ocean with no parameters, with no goals. You need to structure the activity in terms of whatever you fancy. If you're working, the work structures your day. If you're not working, then you need to find whether you're doing cooking, cleaning, practicing music, practicing piano, reading books, rearranging your old albums, decluttering the house. You got to find out and have at least 4 to 5 hours of structuring activity. And lastly, I'm going to talk to you about exercise and prayer. There's plenty of evidence that both exercise and social connectedness both have a very beneficial effect in terms of preventing depression and preventing cognitive decline. Without going into the physiology, exercise stimulates endorphins, to some extent serotonin. Endorphin is endogenous opioid that calms the body. Serotonin is antidepressant that reduces the anxiety, reduces the depression. I won't say no more regarding the prayer. I know that I'm speaking to a group in a house, in a temple. Believe me, the deep prayers, when you feel that you are accepted by a higher power, when you are in communion with God, believe me, that produces extraordinary amount of relaxation, reassurance, and that really, really calms the mind. So I'm going to shut up, Dr. Khosla. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mehta. Our panelists have presented insight into the disease and its devastating impact on life. Our last speaker, Janet Hamill, she'll be discussing how to reduce the stress and build resilience during these difficult times. Janet, you have a very difficult task of catching up on the time also.
I shall.
Janet, Janet Hamill is a registered nurse and integrative healing practitioner at Valley Hospital. For the last 14 years, she's been practicing there. She's been providing support to patients, their families, and staff at Valley Hospital. Janet, it's all yours. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. I'm just trying to find to make the screen bigger. If be patient. Okay, thank you, thank you. I want to thank Dr. Kalsha and the team and all the panelists. And today I'd just like to speak to you about the benefits of incorporating self-care into your life during COVID. As a holistic nurse, integrative practitioner, in my practice, it involves healing using mind, body, and spirit. So self-care also is about being aware of mind, body, spirit as one. It includes self-assessment, looking towards personal development and awareness of being. And it is a priority, self-care, because we really need to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of anyone else. And these are just some examples that of body, mind, and spirit self-care. I like this quote by Maureen Killeron, because stress is not what happens to us, it's our response to what happens. And response is something that we can choose. Most of the time, at least half of the time, our minds are in automatic pilot, right? We're constantly thinking about the past or the present. I mean, the past or the future, and we're not really in the present. And when we're in automatic pilot, we tend to react to what's happening rather than responding with clarity to the situation. I like this acronym STOP. This is one way of not reacting. And the S is for stop. Stop when you're in a difficult circumstance or going through a problem. The T is for take a breath. And often we know that deep breathing techniques are really effective in reducing stress. They're free, they're easy to use, and you can do them anywhere. So slow, deep breathing is done when you breathe in. Your belly should expand. When you breathe out, your belly should fall. And Dr. Mehta went over that a little bit. It's a wonderful technique to be used really everywhere. The 5 top reasons for stress: finances, work, family, personal health, family health issues. Usually we're faced with 1 or 2 of them perhaps at the time. But with the COVID pandemic, many of us experience some or all of these types of stress. And different types of stress, of course, are acute stress. They're intense in nature, but short in duration. Our fight or flight response kicks in, but when the stress is over, our body usually returns to homeostasis and balance. However, with chronic stress, it lingers for a prolonged period of time, and it can lead to illness. And facing the pandemic has many of us constantly in that chronic stress situation. Dr. Mehta also talked about this, so I really won't go over it, but we know that stress can be a factor in disease. So what do we do? How do we build resilience? What is resilience? Resilience is basically a dynamic process. Some of us are genetically prone to it. We're born with it, but everyone can develop resilience through education and support. Resilience is about adapting and surviving in the face of change and adversity. It's our ability to adapt and grow, overcoming obstacles. It's being open to change, and it's about finding that connection. Power of positive thinking. We know that negative thoughts can be self-defeating, but we have to remember that every emotional thought, positive or negative, needs time to be recognized and processed. And it really comes down to our perspective and our attitude. And researchers reveal that people who have an optimistic outlook on various aspects of life, they tend to have an enhanced immune system, lower inflammation, and cortisol levels and healthier lipid levels. And we know that COVID does suppress our immune system, and the virus also increases our inflammatory responses. So research shows optimism correlates with positive outcomes. So when finding positive outlets for our stress, and again, not substituting negative outlets like alcohol, drugs, overeating, or overworking. Intentionality is another way of building resilience. I like this quote by Diane Martin. Thought is powerful. What we think influences what we bring into our experience. And at all times, we have the power to change our experience by changing our perception. So try to set a positive intention every day when you wake up and revisit it during the day. And note how our thoughts affect our bodies and our experiences throughout the day. Techno stress. A lot of people don't realize that this is causing them stress, but it's because of our rapid pace of technology, the floods of information that are pouring in. We go into information overload, which can lead to indecisiveness, inability to focus, poor memory. So it also can cause isolation and alienation. During COVID, technology is being a way to connect also, but we have to realize that we have to schedule distraction-free periods each day. So I'm going to be presenting a few self-care techniques. Just find the ones that speak to you and investigate further. And remember that some of these take practice, 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 and show the full benefits after you're practicing for a while. The first one is about mindfulness. Dr. John Kabat-Zinn in the 1970s developed a secular program called mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is now taught internationally. And his definition of being mindful, being present, is the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose to the present moment, non-judgmentally. And one of the important parts of this quote is paying attention to the here and now, not always being in the past or the future. The past, for a lot of times, is about anger and resentment. The future, most of us hanging out in the future in our minds, it's a lot about worry. So presence is really about this state of being available in a situation, right, with the wholeness of your being and being mindful of where you are. So how do we train ourselves to be mindful? Well, one way is to practice different vehicles of meditation. And these, most of them include the breath, and they can assist us in becoming mindful. And chanting, prayer, transcendental meditation, there's all different types of meditation that you can investigate that may speak to you in the way that you can use mindfulness. So it's really a promising approach to dealing with and recovering, right, from the experiences, the distress, the emotions, and symptoms of trauma since the onset of our COVID. So when we pay attention to our thoughts, our emotions, our body sensations when they arise, moment by moment, we begin to become more awake in our lives, and we can deal with life difficulties and step back from them and see life more clearly. Again, finding balance in all the chaos, right? We need to maintain balance of our body, mind, and spirit more ever, because our fears and worries and anxiety can debilitate us and cloud our judgment, and we can find ourselves making some poor choices. So finding balance any way you can is something that can help us build resilience. There are also some mindfulness apps out there that people have been telling me are very, very helpful in helping them become more mindful, become calmer, become less anxious. So you may want to try some of them. Go on YouTube also and just Google mindful meditations, guided imageries. These are all ways to help you become calm, work with the breath, and become a lot more able to be resilient. We are managing tough times right now, allowing our emotions to come out, and then, you know, being with our emotions and then setting them down, but allowing ourselves to feel. Find a meaningful mantra that might speak to you. especially in a trying situation. A word, a positive affirmation, or think of an image that can be a source of strength. Journaling, tapping into your past. What helped you in the past when you were going through tough times? And centering. And of course, again, always working with the breath. It really does help. A lot of people have been telling me about their problems with insomnia. Now, this is becoming much greater since the pandemic, and it can be due to stress, lack of exercise, illness, medications, sleep apnea, technology. And we know that lack of sleep can cause many of these health problems. Depressed immune system, lapse of attention, slow thinking, irritability, anxiety, depression, even accidents and injuries, and our quality of life goes down with insomnia. So, how can we cope with some insomnia? Well, we can do exercise. We know that that can help us. Dr. Mehta talked about the hormones that are very, very positive and beneficial to us when we exercise. Meditation and prayer, music, journaling. Have a tech free bedroom if you can. And again, stay away from technology 1 to 2 hours before you go to sleep. Have a pre bedtime routine. Avoid alcohol and nicotine. And do the breath work. And Dr. Mehta had spoken about. It's very, very helpful. I like this acronym for self care. It's about it's NESS, and it's about nutrition, exercise, stress management, and support. We know how important nutrition is, and this plate has replaced the pyramid, the food pyramid. And to explain it all is a quote from Michael Pollan: "Eat food, mostly plants, not much." Mindful eating is also very important. It's another part of mindfulness. Eating slowly, okay? Putting the fork or spoon down between each bite. Recognize, are you emotionally eating or are you really hungry? Look at your mind and body and feel how you feel. Have a quiet environment when you're eating. And again, watch that whole foods nutrition and make sure you are eating lots of plants and vegetables. Movement, exercise. Okay, these are some forms of exercise that you can do. Just keep moving. It's very important. Exercise daily if you can, and go back to the gym once you feel it's safe. But exercise is very important part of self care and reducing stress. These are some coping stress management strategies that you may be interested in. Again, noting what you might want to investigate further, what you're continuing doing, and these are examples that, also some of them require, again, that practice. Support, okay, we heard a little bit about that. Yes, it's very important to keep in touch with family, friends, and colleagues, having conversations virtually or being safe with social distancing and masks. Pets seem to be big now, a little bit bigger. Everyone's getting a pet, and they are very good for support. And also seek advice from mentors, spiritual leaders, or therapists if you find that what you're going through right now is very, very hard to handle. Music, we know, is a form of stress reduction. It can be fun, it can be releasing, and the research shows it has a positive effect on our immune system. Go do, find something that you really like, your own personal preference. We do know that soothing classical and healing sounds can help us heal too. But listen, and when you're listening, you can also start moving, right? Start dancing or whatever. Energy therapies. A lot of people are looking into energy therapies now. These are the ones that we use at the Valley Hospital. Energy is therapies are based on ancient Chinese understanding of energy pathways in the human body. And the Western scientists, quantum physicists now, are realizing what Eastern tradition has known for 7,000 years, that we are all made of energy. We have energy centers, we have energy meridians and highways that run through our bodies. And these therapies can restore, balance, heal the human energy systems, give you a sense of well being. We use them for treatment for pain, wound healing, anxiety, and also stress reduction. I'm going to just show you two quick ways to use some energy system. This is part of Jin Jin Jitsu. It's called Worry Fast, these meridian and highways that run through our bodies, and they end up in the hands here. Okay, you can always just Google Worry Fast if you're interested in something like this. I teach it to a lot of my patients. A lot of the doctors are interested in learning this too. And all you do is hold each finger 3 to 20 minutes, whatever is comfortable with you, using both hands as needed. The palm is nourishing everything, so you can hold in a prayer position or you can hold your fingers over your palm. And you just take each finger. So this is called Worry Fast. Your hand is for worry, your index finger is for fear. It's also connected to organs and different emotions. The middle finger is anger. The ring finger is for sadness, and the pinky is for trying too hard. It's also related to the heart. So try something like this. The more you do it, you're going to find the more that it benefits you. Sometimes when you're worried, all of a sudden you'll realize you're holding your thumb, and it can really help relieve some of these emotions. Emotional freedom technique is called tapping, the tapping solution you can look up. And this, we know that a lot of people have a lot of fear in their lives right now. And this is working again with the meridians and between the in the ring finger and the pinky, halfway up between your fingers and your wrist. You just hold this one spot. And what you can do is just tap the area with 2 or 3 fingers, okay, for 30 to 60 seconds, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. Tapping on this point can shift energy of fear within minutes, and then do the other hand. So those are just 2 quick ways to investigate some things about energy healings. Journaling, very, very important way of powerful technique for stress reduction, self-care. It's a method for helping people cope with any type of traumatic event. Some people, don't have any interest in journaling, but some people that start journaling find that improves psychological, physical health, all different types of journaling. And it gets your thoughts in order, helps put things in perspective, and really can help you cope with anxiety and anger, and reduce body tension, and also restore your focus. So if you want to try journaling, being in nature is that we know that nature is a remarkable healing force of homeostasis for mind, body, spirit. And Dr. Mehta talked about going outside more. Without it, our health can suffer. So if you can't get outside and be in nature, bring some flowers or plants into the house. Watch nature documentaries. Use creative visualization and visualize yourself somewhere that's helping with nature and being in nature. And, also working with our spiritual side, self-reflection. It really involves, self-care involves all dimensions, right? Body, mind, and spirit. And it's self-reflection is a process of turning your attention, being still, being silent, finding a place to be alone, and examining yourself inward. Examine your thoughts, feeling, beliefs. Get to know your inner spirituality, right? And believe that each moment of our lives is sacred. Another way is silence, right? Finding the silence. And sometimes we fear silence because it might open doors to thoughts and insecurities that we've locked away. But we've also know that silence can help us with self-discovery, insight, serenity, bring peace and serenity and balance. And it's also nice to be silent when you're with other people. We don't always have to talk. It can be a very powerful means of communication. Self-compassion, what we all need, right? Lots of research over the last decade's been done on self-compassion, shown that those who are more self-compassionate, right, towards themselves tend to have a greater happiness, life satisfaction and motivation, healthier relationships, less anxiety and depression. They also have the resiliency to cope with stressful life events. So bringing self-kindness, acknowledging our suffering and pain, right? Be gentle with yourself, less judgmental. Recognize that what we're going through is all part of a shared common humanity. And mindfulness, being mindful can help us be self-compassionate. Embracing your happiness with self-compassion. Accept yourself. Take care of yourself. Surround yourself with uplifting people. And literally stop and smell the roses. Be present where you are. Forgiveness is something that a lot of people have problems with, and it is part of self-care. And it's for you and your healing, not necessarily the offender. You're not condoning what others did to you, but you're working through the emotional steps to finally find love toward yourself and others. It's taking back your power and the responsibility of how you feel. And it is a choice, and it's coming from your heart space. And forgiveness can open up your heart and can also help you heal. Cultivating gratitude. We know with an attitude of gratitude that you can find happiness. Every morning when you wake up, before you get out of bed, write down or say three to five things that you're grateful for. Right? It's a way to enjoy being in the present moment. It helps us focus on wonderful things we have, and sometimes we overlook. So being grateful is about slowing down and bringing that gratitude into the present moment. Gratitude has a lot of research about it now, and it's has a lot of physical and mental benefits if you want to look into that. This is a book that I really recommend. It's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And it's another way of taking care of ourselves. The Four Agreements are: be impeccable with your word, right? Speak with integrity. Number two is don't take anything personally, because nothing others do is ever because of you. It's projection of their own reality. Don't make assumptions. This one agreement can change your life. Simply do your best. Always do your best when you can, and it helps you avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret, knowing that your best can always change from moment to moment. Boosting your joy, focus on gratitude, boost your happy hormones. Again, choosing optimism, have fun, practice mindfulness, giving to others, be generous. You'd be surprised how just being generous can help change your attitude towards joy. And we know that when emotions become very difficult to deal with, like fear, anger, sadness, isolation, anxiety, there are temporary ways, right, to distract ourselves. Practice mindfulness, breathe, be creative, find some hobbies, paint, bake, learn how to play an instrument, try a fun, challenging game or a puzzle. I know the jigsaw puzzles became very popular during this time. Read a good book, watch a funny movie, and have a virtual celebration with your families and your friends if you can. And I'd like to end with hope. Okay, hope's about reflecting on the global good and support. We remember in Italy how they came out and supported each other through music on the balconies, responding to community needs. How many people need food and the food that's been given out. Interconnectedness, knowing that we are all interconnected. Practicing kindness, patience, compassion, gratitude. What gifts do you have to help with creating a new earth and a possible vision for the future? And demonstrating grace. Namaste, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Janet. It's been wonderful. There are so many questions. I'm sorry we're running short of time here, but I will try to answer and have the panelists answer them. Many of the questions have already been answered, which is when can I get the vaccine? Where can I get the vaccine? Which are all on the guideline, all on the website of the health department. You can really go there and see them. But one question which is important, maybe I'll ask Dr. Balani to answer is, there are two, three questions combined. One is, which vaccine should one take if all the vaccines available are available to a person to take it? And the second question is, do we have to take this vaccine every year like we take a flu vaccine? So please take, we don't have much time, so take in 30 seconds, 1 minute answer if you can. Thank you.
Sure. So at the current time, we have the two vaccines available for both Pfizer and Moderna. The Pfizer has an age cutoff of 16 years and above, so it depends upon the child's age. That'll come into play. But if that's taken care of, then anything that's available is good to take. There's one question regarding, is a 16-year cutoff okay? Yes, answer is yes, because the trial is actually ongoing for 12 to 17 also, and it's been safe so far. Regarding the second question, which was, Dr. Kosa?
You have to take it every year, like flu vaccine.
Chances are you probably will have to take it because I don't know how long this particular antibody response is going to stay, and or if the strain mutates.
Okay. The next question is, I think a lot of questions were answered by Janet and by Dr. Mehta, how to handle stress during this time. So because of lack of time, I will not go through that. Next question is for Dr. Lee. Should my child go back to school and have play dates?
So going back to school is difficult. It's going to depend upon many factors. One is, what's the prevalence of COVID in the community? If the prevalence of COVID in the community is very high, it's likely that there's a higher risk for infection. Also factors such as the child's health, if they have underlying illnesses like severe asthma, immunocompromised, if there is a elderly family member at home, that may make you not want to go back. The risk is lowest for the younger children. So the high school is probably at most risk, but the younger children who are more likely to benefit from having the social interactions, are generally safer. So it sort of depends on how the school's doing. But families should feel comfortable.
There are a lot of similar questions. I'm just trying to put them together. Since there's no vaccine for children, how can we prevent children besides social distancing and masking and washing our hands?
Yeah, unfortunately we don't, but it seems that one of the reasons children have a lower infection rate is probably their immune system is different. And, I don't know if this is encouraging, but children are actually covered with more germs. So they have more viruses that are competing with the COVID. So the point of the mask is to lower the viral load. So if you get a few viruses, that's why the contact is not as important as what you're breathing in. If you breathe it in deeply, you get a large load in your lungs, you're at risk for getting a severe illness. So trying to have the mask is actually very important for lowering the load. But again, children generally are not having as many receptors in their lungs for this. They have an innate immune, which fights the virus better, it's thought. Okay, fewer receptors. So they're better, but it's not zero. So as much as you can, having them wear the mask is going to really help them a great deal.
Thank you. Another question is for Dr. Balani. How effective is vaccine against asymptomatic carriers and those who have recovered from severe infection? Should people who've had COVID take a vaccine?
So the answer is yes, I would recommend that because given the fact that with natural immunity, we really do not know how long the protection lasts. I think it's important to take the vaccine to help boost this particular response back again. So the answer is yes, it should be taken for those who've had the natural disease also. How long it's going to last, the immunity, we have no answer for that as yet.
Another question for you again, Dr. Balani, is someone who has had COVID-19 is still positive after 14 days of isolation and being asymptomatic. How long can the virus stay once they've recovered and quarantine period of 2 weeks is gone?
So one important detail regarding the RT-PCR is, remember, it is just a genetic code that is identified in the lab. It does not tell you whether it is a living virus or it's a dead virus. So when you have a positive PCR, 14, 21, 3 months down the road, it really doesn't tell you whether you're actually shedding infectious virus. The data basically shows that the level of infectiousness decreases as the days goes on, and pretty much in the general public, in an average way, decreases to by the second week or the third week in severe cases to being non-infectious in the community. So the isolation guidelines for the CDC is 10 days after being afebrile and asymptomatic, it should be okay to go out in the public, and it's 21 days for those who have severe disease on presentation.
Another question is for an elderly person, 75 years of age, who recently had shingles vaccine and flu vaccine. How long should they wait before they get the COVID vaccine?
So in all of our trials, the flu vaccine cutoff was 2 weeks. So you have to wait 2 weeks before or after getting the flu vaccine to take the COVID vaccine. Regarding all the other vaccines, it was a 4-week window period. So you have to separate it by 4 weeks.
Good. I think that a lot of them are very similar questions, which probably people may have to go and talk to with their providers to get more information, since they will know more about their medical conditions. So I'm not going to go into that. The other question was, will the vaccine interfere with other medications like chemo, steroids, or depression medications?
So in the vaccine trials, we did have patients who had medical illnesses in stable form. Those who were not taking immunocompromising agents, those who were taking immunocompromising agents were not included in the trial, but we do not foresee a negative outcome. The immunogenicity in those patients, we do not know what the outcome is going to be, whether they will be able to mount the response. So I don't think safety is the issue. I think efficacy may be an issue because we don't have data that whether these patients who are on immunocompromising agents will be able to mount the same amount of antibody response. So it's the efficacy, not the safety.
Dr. Khosla, you're muted.
Sorry. I just want to, in the closing remarks, I just want to thank all of you for attending the conference, and a special thanks to our esteemed panelists for their incredibly informative presentations. I also want to thank our frontline workers, some of whom are in attendance, and I've asked lots of medical questions, which we didn't have time to answer at this time. I also want to thank Hindu Samaj of Mahwah for hosting it, and our volunteers, Sanjay Gera, Vasanta Ambat, and Kiran Mahendru for their hard work and dedication. While vaccine brings hope in 2021, life will not return to normal for some time. I hope that tools we learned today will help us deal with it. Everything positive has to be cherished. Let us celebrate our hope and positive moments with our loved ones. We will be stronger in the end. Thank you all for joining. We wish you all a very happy, healthy, and a hopeful new year. Be safe. This concludes our seminar. Thank you again.